The FBI has completed 3 large studies over a 15-year period. They did some very in-depth analysis of cops, bad guys, and their encounters. As part of this research project, they developed something called a per incident hit rate, right? Now, most of us, when I say hit rate, we're like, I know what that is. If I fire 100 shots, I hit with 50% of them, my hit rate is 50%. The FBI couldn't do that. They developed what they called a per incident hit rate. So the way this works, let's say I'm in 3 shootings. In each of the 3 shootings, I fire 15 rounds. In one of those shootings, of the 45 rounds I fire, one of them hits the bad guy in the arm. What is my per incident hit rate? It's 33%, because I got 1 hit somewhere in one of the fights, right? So per incident hit rate is a very abysmal measure of performance.
POM pepper spray has recently reformulated for even more effect when you bless the deserving with the hot sauce. POM is what I use between a harsh word and a gun, and encourage everyone to do likewise.
And it was interesting, when the FBI looked at the officers involved, the per incident hit rate was 39%, which sounds really, really bad and depressing, okay? Now, what was interesting though was this. The reason it was so low is that in most of the fights, the first clue the officer was in a gunfight was what? Getting shot or shot at, right? That was the first clue that this was not the normal traffic stop. When officers were not injured, the per incident hit rate was 62%. Is that a dramatic increase in performance? Okay, when we see some dramatic increase in performance, how about this? When the officers fired first, the per incident hit rate was 100%. Guys, if you're shooting first, are you in your emotional mind or your rational mind? You are making a decision to put the gun into the fight and break the shot. And the hit rates very much show that, right? What is the lesson from this? This is what you pay me the big bucks for. Shoot first and don't get shot, right? The secret to gunfighting. Yes. Why? Because it's gonna affect which mind you're using. If you're shooting first, you're in the rational mind. One of my favorite studies, because it's so hard to find research from when cops actually win, was done by Dr. Darrell Ross. In order to get his pool of where cops won, he drew his sample size from federal civil rights lawsuits. Okay? In his sample, 97% of the bad guys were dead. Okay? Handguns are terribly ineffective stoppers and killers. You know, it's not an exact number, but a commonly bandied number is that only 10% of the people shot with handguns in this country actually die, right? Long guns are the complete opposite, and supposedly about 90% of the people shot with long guns in this country die, only 10% survive. So, if 97% of these people are dead, they were either A, shot well, shot a lot, or somehow, by some weird quirk, the ambulance did not get on scene fast enough to make a difference. Those are the only 3 possibilities I can see here, right? He looked at 86 incidents involving 121 officers. For 93%, it was that officer's first shooting. So it's not like these are guys that have been in a bunch of gunfights as far as this stuff goes. The kind of calls they're on: suspicious person, domestic, vehicle stop, after a vehicle pursuit. What kind of officers are these? These aren't SWAT guys. These are much more along the lines of regular patrol guys. When the officer was by themselves, they had an 80% hit rate. 80% is pretty damn good. When we looked at shooting frequency, more than a third shot more than monthly. So that's at least 2 range trips a month to make that. Anytime you get into bunch shooting situations, the hit rate goes down dramatically. So when they were on the scene by themselves, they delivered the goods 80% of the time. Interestingly enough, 65% of the shootings took place in low light situations. What do our hit rates tend to do in low light? Tend to drop. 40% of the shootings involved movement. Now, how's this for some indication that they were in the rational mind? 55% had the gun in their hand when the shooting started. If you got the gun in your hand, are you shocked and surprised that you're about to be in a gunfight? No? Do I have any firearms instructors in the rooms? Okay. Are you ready to go crazy with stats and when they go drive you crazy and haunt you forever? 15% of these guys used cover. That's it. Several reasons for that, right? Number one, short duration, high intensity events, okay? Most of the time, I can either get to cover, right? Or I can shoot, but I can't do both. One of the classic lines from Gunsight is what? Plant your feet and prepare for live fire, right, Jerry? Am I at least close, right? All right. In my mind, if you have confidence in your skill and you know you can deliver the goods, what do you tend to do? Plant your feet and deliver the hits. And that's what I think we're seeing. These guys aren't running to cover. When somebody tries to kill them, their response is not to try to run away, right? Their response is what? In the immortal words of Nathan Bedford Forrest, no man kills me and lives, right? When we look at physical fitness, 90% of these guys were physically fit. 75% reported having scenario-based training. What is that? Force on force. A third reported that they used mental imagery as part of their preparation. 90% stayed in law enforcement after their shooting. That's significant because that means that only 10% left law enforcement after their shooting. National average, about 25% of officers will leave law enforcement after their first shooting, right? This tells me that they were what? They were prepared for this thing. Only 25% reported experiencing post-shooting problems. Ross found that all these guys had very well pre-planned responses. Realized multitasking isn't that much of a thing, but there's a lot of stuff. If you think about you're a working cop and stuff like that, vehicle pursuits, radio traffic, there's a lot of stuff you have to manage. All these guys managed that stuff very well. They had to be able to quickly assess and act. 95%, like that's almost all of them, where the decision to shoot or not shoot was made in less than 2 seconds. 70% of the shoot, no shoot decisions had to be made in less than 1 second. We see that they relied much more on patterns than explicit observations. So what we want the police to do is to wait and see what the object is in that guy's hand. Is it a cell phone or a gun? The problem with that is what? If you wait to absolutely identify that object, you're going to take rounds in that process. What you see, and we can call this as a very good example. If I'm accessing a gun in my front waistband, what do we see this arm tend to do? Forms a very distinct triangle, right? If I'm grabbing a gun back here, stuff like this. Those officers were having to make the shoot, no shoot decisions, not on explicit observations, but what? Observations of movement. When they saw the guy dive for the front of his waistband, did they know what that meant? Yeah, absolutely. They had built mental maps in order to do so. And how did they do it? I think scenario-based training is a huge, huge part of that. In a nutshell, they won because they started rational and they stayed there. Ross didn't test this, but I would bet every dollar in my pocket that if you look at these guys' qualification scores, that they are above average shooters. I think that's a very, very safe assumption.